Welcome to a brand new episode of CNB Bazaar Buzz here on the NDTV network. I am Cyrus Dhabhar. As you can see behind me, it's the brand new CLS. But we won't talk about that car much on the show. That will be something that I'll showcase a little more in detail next week. This week though, we've got a jam-packed show with a very special comparison and a very special play day out for me, or play weekend out for me. Take a look. The facelift Aspire takes on the Dzire and the Amaze. And I try my hand at motor racing. So let's get straight into the big story we have this week. The new Ford Figo Aspire facelift takes on its biggest rivals, the Maruti Suzuki Dzire and the Honda Amaze. Now, have the changes made a big difference? Is it the new benchmark in the segment, or does the Honda Amaze still hold its own? Check it out. The subcompact sedan is unique to India, and there are quite a few major players in the segment. The Maruti Suzuki Dzire is of course the leader with over 20,000 units sold every month year on year, and Honda recently updated the Amaze with the second generation. And now Ford, not to be left behind, has updated the Ford Figo Aspire too. So how does it stack up against its contemporaries? Well, for starters, I personally like this new grille. It goes well with the global Ford design language and makes the Aspire look a little bit more grown up. The Dzire too has a similar gaping front end, while the Amaze of course is the most different of the lot, with that flat bulldog-like nose that does get its polarized views. That said, both the Dzire and the Amaze get LED daytime running lights, and the Aspire does not, a fact that we find quite bewildering. All three also run on 15-inch alloy wheels, but while the Amaze and the Aspire get a set of plain silver alloys, the Dzire gets a lovely two-tone, a much better looking one in my opinion. It's great to see how these subcompact sedans have evolved in terms of design from their last generation to their current generation. Of course, the Amaze looks far better. Dzire, of course, looks a whole bunch better than the last generation. But in terms of sheer design, when you put all these three together, it's the Figo Aspire that's still sort of the nicest of the lot. It still looks most contemporary and most modern, but they really have missed an opportunity when they did the facelift up front, because they could have easily added in a set of LED tail lamps, maybe a little bit more in terms of just some design element on the boot, maybe a little lip spoiler, and that would have made the car look so much nicer. But as I mentioned, in terms of sheer design, in terms of pure design and not elements as such, the Aspire is still the better car. In terms of elements, you do have the Amaze that has this nice sort of boomerang design there, or the Dzire that gets LED tail lamps as standard on all variants. Even the LXi, the base model, gets those LED tail lamps. While the exterior bits do have some similarities, the interior on these three cars are completely different from one another. So let's start with the Aspire. Typically Ford in its approach, the dashboard has a high-set touchscreen, well-laid buttons, and quite a lot of small storage spaces. The screen in particular, as with all Ford products, is the best in class and has a very good user interface, and to top it all off, it has a great touch feedback too. The Dzire, on the other hand, is the most plain looking of the lot here, but it also has a sense of upmarketness that might be missing in the others, and that is probably because of the wood inserts that it has. The screen is larger than on the Aspire, and while the interface isn't as good, both these cars get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. One of the big bane of contentions for the last generation Honda Amaze was the fact that the interior just wasn't up to par. This new one though is extremely cool, and I'm really glad that the sort of crazy design elements of Hondas of the past have sort of come in. So you get this squarish horn button, very cool design. I really genuinely do like this little thing. Even the instrument clusters, very clean, very modern, very contemporary looking. And even though this is the top of the line automatic version, it doesn't get the touchscreen infotainment system, but on the manual you do get that touchscreen. But on the whole, the Amaze has always been a very practical vehicle, lots of little cubby holes, a lot of storage space on each side. And now with this new dashboard, I think the interior is probably the best in its segment, just in terms of pure design. Since we are already in the Amaze, let's start by telling you how that one drives. And the answer for this, and honestly all the other cars here, is that it actually drives really well. In fact, it is surprising how almost everything else in this segment has now become a great car overall. Power comes from that tried and tested 1.2 litre iVTEC petrol engine that makes 89 brake horsepower and 110 Nm of peak torque, and that puts it in between the Aspire and the Dzire. That said, it is the least fuel efficient of the two, with just 19.5 km on offer. Now, all the subcompact sedans that we have on the comparison test today are essentially the same engine size, 1.2 litre, and they're all naturally aspirated. And the engine size is the same because, of course, the government regulation states you can't have a bigger engine than that if you're in that sub 4 meter category, or you won't get the excise benefits. That said, as with everything else in life, some engines are of course more equal than others, and that's exactly the case with the Dragon series engine that Ford has debuted on the Freestyle, and now same engine you get on the Aspire. It's the most powerful engine of the lot in this category, and it's got 95 horsepower and 120 Nm, and that horsepower figure is actually considerably higher than the likes of the highest selling car in the segment, which of course is the Dzire at 82 horsepower. And it's not just powerful on paper, it actually is a lot better to drive too, a lot more responsive, revs much nicer. Even though that Dzire engine is really good, and we're all of course very used to it, this engine has a lot of poke in the top top end of the rev range too, and that's the kind of engine I like. Surprisingly though, even though it is the most powerful of the lot here, it also manages to eke out a decent fuel efficiency figure of 20.4 km per litre, which actually is quite commendable. And that brings us to Mr. Familiarity right here, which is of course the Maruti Dzire. Now there's a reason this car sells so well. Of course it's because of the far-reaching sales and service outlets that Maruti has, but also because it is a great car. Now it might not be the most powerful of the lot, but it is one of the nicer ones to drive because the engine is so smooth, so refined, and we're all used to this engine by now, and because of that we actually know how to wriggle it into performing really well. That said, what it does really have going for it is that fuel efficiency figure, 22 km per litre, not just on paper, but it's also very fuel efficient in real life. India is evolving as a market, and automatics are getting more and more popular, and it comes as no surprise that all three of these are available with an Autobox option on the petrol engine, and they are all as different as can be. The Dzire is an AMT, the Amaze is a CVT, and the Aspire gets a larger 1.5 litre petrol engine with a traditional torque converter. That said, the Aspire does not get a diesel auto option, whereas the Dzire and the Amaze get the AMT and the CVT diesel, a first in the world, respectively. Picking a winner between the Dzire, Aspire and the Amaze is a difficult job. Each has its own positives. The Aspire drives the best and has 6 airbags on the top spec, making it the safest too. The Amaze of course has that very tempting diesel CVT amongst being really well designed on the interior, and of course the Dzire, apart from being a jack of all trades, has that Maruti juggernaut to fall back upon in terms of service. That said, as an all-round approach, it is still the Amaze that takes this test by a whisker due to its overwhelming ability as an all-round package. Yes, we know some of you don't like the way it looks, but it is still our winner in the Subcompact Sedan Shootout and still the benchmark. That Ford Figo Aspire is definitely a great car to drive and does offer some fantastic driving dynamics, but the Honda Amaze is just a better package, and therefore it still gets our vote as the benchmark of that subcompact segment. Now though, it's time to head into a quick commercial break. After the break, we'll be right back with something that's personally a very special story for me. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back to CNB Bazaar Buzz. Now before the break we showed you the big
mega comparison between the subcompact sedans, the Aspire, the Amaze and the Dzire. Now though, let's get into a bit more fun, but still a subcompact sedan story. It's a bit of a subcompact sedan special this week, but it's the most Frankenstein of all subcompact sedans. It's the Ameo race car. Now last year I drove the Ameo race car at the Curry Motorsport Speedway in Coimbatore, and I absolutely loved it. It's the best VW motorsport car that's been launched in 10 years. But now, a few weeks ago, VW gave me the chance to actually race it in the Ameo Cup, not amongst my journalist friends, but amongst actual professional drivers. It was a fun-filled weekend, a lot of emotion. It wasn't as easy as it seems, but at the end of the week, it was just unbelievable levels of epic fun.
India's only one-make series on 4 wheels has been run by Volkswagen India for well over a decade now and has produced quite a long line of fantastic racers. Race car drivers are immensely fit, on a strict exercise and diet plan, and in general very focused, unlike yours truly. But when VW India called and asked me if I wanted to do some real-life racing in the final Ameo Cup race of the year, I jumped at the chance. First, of course, was the mandatory driver's briefing, and even with the sheer driving experience that most of us have on the track here at the Booth International Circuit, a formal FMSCI sanctioned race is a whole different ballgame. And as with every level of motorsport, rules come first and are to be followed to the T, and that is applicable to us as much as it is for the actual drivers in the Ameo Cup. And then it was time to get into these cars and head out onto the track for the first practice session. The cars we would race would be these: the purpose-built Ameo Cup car, 1.8 litres, turbocharged 4-cylinder engines up front, a sequential gearbox with launch control that makes even the Lamborghini Aventador feel tame, and of course, slick tyres. These cars in race trim make about 205 horsepower and of course get all the trimmings such as a full race spec roll cage, race seats and a 5-point harness. Oh, and incidentally, Volkswagen India will sell you one for about 40 lakh rupees for on-track use only.
Now this is a proper FMSCI run race, which means that you can't be dressed like this because it of course is a hazard if you have a crash. So you do need to get into a proper race suit, which is what we have here. I hope I fit into one. And you need to have a proper helmet, a proper harness set, a proper set of shoes, proper inners too. So we're going to get into all of this. Let's hope I fit into it. Just about fits, but I don't think the family jewels are too happy about it.
The first practice session is about 30 minutes long, but considering the fact that I am slightly larger, okay, maybe a little more than slightly larger, than your average race car driver that the Ameo Cup car is built for, getting into the car with the helmet on and the Hans device on was a bit of a struggle. And yes, as much as I hate to admit it, I actually did manage to get myself a little stuck, which was frankly very embarrassing.
Now that I've somehow managed to fit into my race suit, and I'm in the car, rather difficult because it is a little cramped. It's time to actually put the 5-point race harness on, and again, this is where normal seat belts will never work because it is a race situation after all, and with most races you do have a bit of a tussle between drivers, and these 5-point harnesses really do help you keep you in your seat. That said, unlike our normal seat belts which are slightly loose, these have to be absolutely tight so that I genuinely cannot move from my race position once I'm actually in. Of course, they are very, very safe, and they'll ensure that I don't get thrown around in case I have an accident.
The Booth International Circuit is about 5 kilometers long and is a pure power circuit, and getting used to a car with slick tires is not an easy task. Getting the tires warmed up, getting the brakes heated up to work, and just getting in sync with the car in general is quite a task, and all of this with a temperature outside of 35 degrees makes things a lot more difficult.
So the practice session wasn't exactly perfect because I did feel a little claustrophobic, a little sick because I am not used to these cars, and throwing me in the deep end was a little bit of a shock for me. Although I have driven one of these before, but without a helmet, without a race suit on, it's a bit of an experience when you have everything on, trust me. That said, it's time for qualifying, which is a 15-minute session. Fastest lap is of course the guy who starts up front, as with all qualifying sessions. I'm going to go out there. I have changed the setup a little bit, changed the PSI in the front tires a little bit more so that the car doesn't understeer as much as it was. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to get out there and most importantly, have a lot of fun. It's officially the end of day one, and although the first session wasn't a whole bunch of fun, qualifying on the other hand was, as you can see from the grin on my face, an absolute ball. It's not about setting fast lap times, that's a racing driver's excuse. It's about having a lot of fun, and trust me, I did have a ton of fun. I've done 3 hot laps. I haven't qualified last, which is great because I just wasn't getting the hang of it. Another racing driver's excuse right there for you, but I'm really genuinely looking forward to day 2 now. It's going to be wheel-to-wheel racing. Tomorrow is going to be 2 races. This is what happens. Race day. While I admit the fact that I suck at single lap qualifying, it's wheel-to-wheel racing that I truly enjoy. And starting at the back of the grid might be a bad thing, of course, but it's also the best place if you really want to get into all the action. And again, it was about 38 degrees outside, so after drenching myself with a few liters of water to stay cool, it was time to line up and get on with it. If you've never been in a proper race, I urge you to go and experience one. The sheer adrenaline rush it offers is absolutely fantastic. Having made some places up in the first corner with a mighty aggressive overtake move, if I say so myself, and having an action-filled first lap, the race was sadly red flagged due to a massive accident behind us. And after the restart, it was even more fun. I finally had my rhythm going and made up a few more places up to 11th place when another crash meant the safety car was once again called out, and sadly, the race actually finished under safety car too. I'm going to try and be loud because we just finished the first race, and it was actually much better than I expected. I started on 16th position. I made a few places up in the first lap, had a few scary moments going off the track, but I think I've ended up just outside the top 10 maybe, which means I have a better start position on the next outing, and I still get the inside line on the start sort of grid. Race 2. But we had no time to rest as race 2 was just around the corner. By the time we got into the second race of the day, I had really started to get comfortable with the car. Having made my way up to 8th place from 11th in the first opening lap, fighting my way up to 7th, I overcooked it on one of the corners, going in too wide and off the track, dropping back down to 11th, and then even worse, down to 15th as I repeated the same mistake on yet another corner on the next lap in what could only be described as a heart-in-mouth incident. That said, all's well that ends well, and having fought my way back up to 11th place and almost taking 10th place, I came out of the race without a single scratch or dent on the absolutely fantastic Ameo Cup car, grinning from year to year. It's days like this that genuinely leave me, even me who has the knack of talking so much to you on camera, it's days like this that leave me a little speechless. It's one of the perks of our job to come and do stuff like this, to professionally race in proper race cars on the best racetrack in the country, the BIC, which is one of my favorite tracks also in the country. But the car's been so good, and I'm nowhere near the kind of limit that the car can take. You know, VW Motorsport, I have to give it up to them. They've done a damn good job with developing these cars in India, and at the end of the day, It's just been an experience I might never forget. This is the kind of stuff you tell your grandchildren about, and it's just been so much fun. I genuinely can't wait to come back and do this again, and next time get even faster and much better.
Trophies and sets for rupees.
What an absolutely phenomenal experience that weekend was, and it certainly gives me a lot more respect for everything that goes on in motorsport. Not just the drivers, who are of course much fitter than I definitely am, but also the teams and the mechanics and all the behind the scenes action that goes into preparing these absolutely phenomenal, absolutely brilliant cars. That said, we've been teasing the CLS through the whole show, but I haven't said much about it, and that's because we'll have a very detailed walkabout for you on next week's episode. So please do stay tuned for that and watch us next week. That said, as always, remember to wear those seat belts if you're in a car. Remember to wear that 5-point racing harness if you're in a race car. Remember to wear that helmet if you're on a two-wheeler at the front or as a passenger, and do ride and drive safely. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.